Well, Peter was very arrogant, one would say.
So, Joe, what was it like for you to work again with the Wailers, with the band on this new album?
To be honest with you, it was mixed emotion.
I bet.
First of all, it was like meeting people who you have gone to school with, and I've seen them for years, and they have completely changed. Some are monsters, some are angels, anymore, and that was a total experience. But we got it over with.
Hello, everybody. You're welcome back again to the Reggae Appreciation Society. History always remembers the stars and the heroes who do great exploits, but too often forget their teachers who lit the first sparks, mentors that imparted their knowledge, that molded legends, even if they never became legends themselves. No other example of this fact is more fitting than the incredible life and times of the great Joe Higgs, the true godfather and creative pillar of reggae music. One of the original pioneers of Jamaica's music industry, he was the first artist out of Trenchtown to become a household name and made it his life's work to uplift ghetto youths by teaching them the rudiments of music. He would literally train hundreds or even thousands of youth, many of whom became legends of the reggae genre. And some of these eventual icons were Judy Mort, Jimmy Cliff, the Wailing Souls, and his most popular students in the Wailers. He would maintain a relationship with his proteges for many years to come, even touring and collaborating with them. In fact, at several times, they would run back to their teacher for help, and he never hesitated to help them. But amidst the great rapport with most of his students, the teacher, or maestro, as he was fondly called, felt disappointed by his most famous proteges, and several times was forced to call them out for not being men of their word, with strong words aimed especially at Bob Marley and Peter Tosh for issues over copyright infringement and outright exploitation of his goodwill. And he went to his grave feeling let down by these guys, prompting us to ask the question, did the Wailers betray their teacher? Now this story begins with the then 24-year-old Joseph Benjamin Higgs organizing music classes out of the back of his mother's house at number 19 3rd Avenue in Trenchtown in 1964. Though a successful and well-known musician, he was passionate about keeping ghetto youth out of trouble and paving a path for them to success as musicians. And among the many that gravitated towards him were Bob Marley, Bunny Wailer, Peter Tosh, and Beverly Kelso. And after 2.5 years of intensive coaching, the four of them would ace an audition with producer Coxstone Dodd, and their first single, Simmer Down, became a monster #1 hit in late that year. Their breakout success was the product of Higgs' musical DNA, not just technical stuff like songwriting, harmonies and breath control, but the concept of sending a message in their lyrics. Joe Higgs was indeed the first Jamaican artist to infuse conscious content in his songs, telling the stories of everyday ghetto life, the very cornerstone of roots reggae. The Wailers became one of Jamaica's leading groups over the next few years and bagged a deal with Island Records in 1972. But as the story goes, internal tensions led to Bunny Wailer quitting the band towards the end of their UK tour to promote their album Catch a Fire in June 1973. And with the American leg of their tour coming up in a few weeks, Bob and Peter would panic and desperately needed someone with an intimate knowledge of their music and talented enough to fill the void. No one else fit the description more than their former teacher, Joe Higgs. He was a better singer than all of them combined. He could play the drums and was even a better percussionist than Bunny. And when they got back to Jamaica, they went over to beg him to save their tour. Joe would agree and slot in seamlessly as they hit the US and delivered a slew of fantastic shows from the middle of July 1973 and ended it with a spectacular performance at the Capitol Record Tower studio in Hollywood in September. But after the tour was over, Joe Gibbs wasn't paid for his magnificent role on that tour and felt betrayed, particularly by Bob, who he would refer to as a user in an interview some years later. It so happened that Joe, out of love, had jumped on the tour without demanding a salary or a specific amount of money, and it left him feeling exploited and disappointed. He was always very suspicious of the music business and was working as an independent artist. He hadn't recorded any album and made a living primarily of doing live shows around Jamaica. Despite having mentored several stars and being a fantastic musician himself, he was really struggling financially, and by 1974, he was almost penniless. Things got to a head when his brother died and he didn't have the money to bury him. In desperation, he confronted Bob Marley at his home at 54 Hope Road in Kingston about not getting paid for his work during the Catch a Fire tour, and eventually got $1,500 from the Tough Gong. The whole matter left a very bad taste in Joe's mouth. He had performed the service out of goodwill and had gotten almost nothing back in return. But 2 years later, he would get an even bigger shock. In 1977, Peter released his critical and commercial smash album, Equal Rights, a spectacular compilation with standout classics like title track Equal Rights, Get Up Stand Up, Down Presser Man, and African. But no song became more iconic and associated with Peter than the track Stepping Razor, an ominous anthem of swagger, defiance, and militancy that would come to embody his rebellious image. In fact, the Stepping Razor became Peter's alter ego, a lethal karate expert and Rastafarian rebel. It helped the album become a stunning success and all-time classic. But there was a problem. It was credited to Peter as performer and writer, while in reality it had been written and first performed by Joe Higgs exactly 10 years before then. In 1967, Joe Higgs applied to enter the Jamaican National Song Competition to perform the song Stepping Razor, but when he submitted it, the organizers felt the song was too confrontational and militant for the event. Now it's not very clear if Joe offered that song to Peter or he just found it by himself, but it ended up on the Equal Rights album. To be honest, listening to it didn't make sense for years, with the lyrics that said, "I'm like a stepping razor, don't you watch my size, I'm dangerous." Peter was a giant, standing at 6 feet 5 inches tall, while the lyrics sound like a smallish man warning a bully not to underestimate him because of his size. And when I found out that this song was written by Joe Higgs, who wasn't a big man, it all finally made sense. Despite the song's success, Joe wouldn't earn a dime in royalties and eventually discovered that Peter, and not him, was credited as the writer. Once again, while an outstanding artist, he was a novice on the business side of music. I really can't say if Peter did it on purpose, but it happened anyway. And Joe at the time was then too poor to afford the legal representation to fight for the rights to Stepping Razor. By 1982, he was on the verge of losing his home, and in desperation, he would reach out to a government official named Olivia Grange, the Parliamentary Secretary for Information and Culture. She would intervene and through legal processes froze all payment of royalties to Peter and his record label. And after a couple of calls to Peter, she got him to sign a statement that confirmed that Joe Higgs and not him was the writer of Stepping Razor. Eventually, the royalties were paid and Joe's house was saved. All in all, Joe's relationship with his former students left a lot to be desired. It's worthy of note that he also collaborated with his former students like the Wailing Souls and Jimmy Cliff, recording and going on tour with them, but never had a cause to complain about them. Now, to answer the question of if the Wailers truly betrayed him is difficult to conclude, as the informal and definitely unofficial nature of the collaborations in those early days makes it difficult to determine. But one thing I can say for a fact is that they certainly didn't honor him the way they should have, especially when you compare how he was treated with great honor by the likes of Jimmy Cliff, who in particular would accord him great respect up until his passing in 1999. In Joe's last years, he expressed a few regrets at not becoming a bigger success than he became, but was still deeply satisfied at laying the foundations of reggae to become a global juggernaut. And if we're being honest, the man deserved better, but such they say is life. So there you have it. Thank you for watching this video today. Please leave a like, subscribe, and until next time, God bless.